Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alessandra Narudvari and I'm an author based in Nova Scotia, Canada. In my free time, I study the topic of the medieval Knights Templar, the possibility that they visited North America some 700 years ago. I'll be staying on the trail of Templars, but I will be taking you to sunny Brazil, where Dr. Kathleen Ball of California found an amazing cave/gold mine that bears the emblem of the Knights Templar. She even produced an award-winning documentary that you can watch on a website called Gaia.com. Dr. Ball is in the final stretches of publishing her book that details the Templar quest she's been on for quite some time now. In the meantime, you can watch this two-part interview that I did with Dr. Ball. We covered a host of topics, not just Templars, but also Mary Magdalene, metaphysics, quantum physics, and so forth. I hope that you will find something in it that will speak to you personally and that you can take away and incorporate into your own life. Enjoy. Hello, Kathleen.
Hello, how are you, Alessandra?
I'm very well, thank you. I want to thank you for meeting me in cyberspace and
Uh-huh.
for agreeing to do an interview with me about the Knights Templar in Brazil.
Right, right. Very exciting.
Yes,
Yes.
I've had a long time interest in the Knights Templar, and I have been looking for them in North America, namely
Right.
on Oak Island, which is just off the coast of Nova Scotia. And when I heard rumors that somebody found traces of the medieval Knights Templar in South America, in Brazil, I thought I
Right,
should follow the story, and that's how I found you.
right. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I actually discovered the cave in 2015. I was hiking with a friend in Brazil. We were intending to head to John of God. I had a really serious liver condition at the time. And I had been dealing with liver cancer for 3.5 years at that point. And so she suggested that we go to Brazil and go see John of God and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, what happened is I got there early. And so she said, well, why don't we go up and see these waterfalls up in the Chapada, which is a national forest area up it's a national park actually. It's about 3.5 miles outside of Brasilia. And she said they're magnificent. There's, several of them, and they are ancient sacred sites for the indigenous people in Brazil. So we hiked up there. We drove up there, and the next day we started hiking. And a couple days later, we actually found somebody that directed us to one of the waterfall sites. And that person invited us to lunch. His name was Tattoo. They called him Tattoo. Anyway, he owned a camping posada, which was on Agua Fria property. And he mentioned that the guy next door to him, the family next door to him, had property that had some crystal veins running through it. And one in particular was like 2.5 to 3 kilometers long. And it was like a meter thick and a meter high, which was pretty significant. And he said that there were thousands of crystals just strewn all over the property, quartz crystal, and asked us if we want to see it. And we said, sure. So Adele Good and I, we drove over there to meet this kid who's actually a young man. And he was our guide. He was a family member of the owner of the property at the time and caretaker. Anyway, he led us out there. We saw this wonderful crystal vein. It was like 100 and something degrees. We were cooking by the time we got, it's five or 6 kilometer hike. And he says, hey, would you ladies like to go see this cave and go cool off? There's trees and bushes in the area. And I said, sure, let's do it. So we hiked down another kilometer or so, and we get up to this cave, and he pulls the bushes back, and I just about fainted. I'm like, oh my God. I said, this is a Templar cave. This is a Knights Templar cross. What is it doing out here in the middle of Brazil? I had never heard of the Templars being in South America at that time. So it was
You,
really,
But you knew about them because you recognized the symbol.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had been to France. My husband and I had our honeymoon in 2009 in France. And it turned out to be a spiritual quest, is what happened. It was, I guess I should back up. I had a near death experience in 1990.
Oh
And
my
from
gosh.
that time forward, I've had a whole lot of spiritual experiences. I feel like I've been on a grail quest my whole life, actually. And there's been a whole lot of synchronistic events that led up to the discovery of the cave. So in 2009, my husband and I were in France. Our whole itinerary just fell apart. So we ended up doing our own, you know, designing our own itinerary and just kind of going with the flow. And we ended up in a little town called Dome, France, which is where they housed the Templars in, 1307 initially to 1314 when they ended up, and burning them at the stake. So we're in Dome, France, and we're going into this grotto, and the guide is telling us all about this grotto, which didn't really interest me because we'd seen some other grottos in France that were far more interesting, and with a lot more pictographs and petroglyphs and things that were just a lot more interesting. So anyway, we get out of that grotto, and the museum curator says, "Hey, would you like to go see the Templar where the Templars were housed before they were killed? In this castle dungeon. It's just right over, a few blocks." And I said, "Sure." So he hands me the key to this place and says, "Bring me back the key when you're done." I was like, shocked.
You were given the key to the whole dungeon?
So he gave me the keys to the dungeon. So we go, and then he guided us over there. So, and then says, "I'll see you when when you're finished." So I photographed the whole place. I mean, I photographed everything, and I could feel since the near death experience, I can sense energy. I pick up on energy in places, and I've actually had a lot of visual experiences and stuff. So anyway, I'm I'm just really keying into the energy of the Templars having been there, the fear and the destruction and the sorrow, and then there was a sense of peace I actually felt in there too. But I photographed all the crosses and all the graffiti. And so fast forward to 2015, when I see this cross above the cave, it's exactly the same style cross that I saw in Dome, France,
How
and
exciting.
the same tool marks. So
Oh.
it was a hand carved cross, just like the ones in Dome, France. This was not done by machine, it was done by hand chiseling. So anyway, so I get a little short interview with Leomar, who was our guide in Alta Paraíso, at this cave, and it's all in Portuguese. So I can't understand much of what he's saying, other than the fact that he made some mention of more caves, grottos, they call them grottos, in the vicinity. And so anyway, it took me a couple of years to get that translated. I finally got it translated, and come to find out there are three more caves up there.
Wow.
So next year, hopefully, we'll see what happens this summer with this whole COVID thing. But if not, I'm going to get back get back up to the area next year. Um, and I'm going to be exploring the three other caves. In addition to, I have a metal detector over there now that I had sent over there, and I have a lot of friends in the area now. I've been back to Brazil several times, and we're going to be doing some significant archaeological, just dig over there and see what we can find in terms of artifacts and whatever we can to back it up. The locals all tell that the Templars, they tell stories that the Templars were there.
I was wondering about that. So what do the local people have to say about the cross and the other caves? Are there any legends?
Well, it's kind of interesting because the caves are gold mines,
Oh,
and
okay.
they're no longer working. Okay, they're no longer working mines, but they've taken all the gold out.
Hmm.
But yeah, Yeah, so it makes sense because the Templars were, they had treasure. They had a tremendous amount of treasure. They had more money than just about anybody in Europe back in the 1300s, from 11 to 1300s, when they were finally shut down, I guess, basically by the church. And of course, the King of France had a big part in that too. So anyway, they were mining gold. And what they were doing with it, I have no idea. But just below the cave, probably another maybe 10 kilometers below where I discovered this cave, there's a farm that's owned by a woman named Leonia, and I interviewed her. Have you seen the documentary? Have you actually watched?
Yes, I signed
Yes.
up for Gaia. I bought a membership at
Oh, you
Gaia,
did?
and your documentary was the first one that I watched and saved on
Oh,
my playlist.
oh,
Yes,
okay.
I remember the lady, and I remember that she had some artifacts and some stories to
Yes.
tell.
Yes. Yeah, so she told me the story of her great great grandfather arriving. He was a ship captain, and of course that wasn't until much later. But there's some indication. Of course, the locals. This is why I went to interview her. The locals told me that that was Templar land, and that the land that the cave was on was also Templar land. They actually owned or had homesteaded, whatever you call it at that time. I mean, you didn't buy land back then. You just took it over. They had land and property in Moina, San George, Altaparizo, and Cavalcante. There's 4 towns in this area, in the Chapada National Park area, and they form a triangle, which is interesting.
Really,
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. And I actually interviewed a professor from the University of Brasilia who teaches sacred geometry.
right?
And yeah, she's done some studies, and her personal, I guess you'd call it life project has been to um, find Templar artifacts and glyphs and things like that, remnants, things that they left in the area. And she claims that they laid a sacred geometry grid in the area, and that they came to colonize the area
Mm-hmm.
so they could recreate what they had created in Portugal,
Mm-hmm.
which was a sovereign nation,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So, and this sovereign nation, this idea, which was, I believe, their real agenda, is made up of people from all over the world, from all ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, economic backgrounds, etc., who live in harmony and equality within that nation. And I think that they had intended on expanding that to the world at some point. Now, when Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake, and he made mention of returning in 700 years, there's been several people talk about this. Freddie Silva talks about this in his book too. Um, and so, what was really interesting to me was that when I was invited to join the procession in Tomar in 2019 in Portugal, this happened to be the day that the Templars united for the first time in 700 years from all over the world. They were in Tomar.
I've got goosebumps. In the documentary, I saw some footage from Portugal with Templars wearing their uniforms, riding on horses, carrying flaming torches. It was quite mesmerizing. I couldn't take my eyes off that.
Yes,
So this was the procession that united Templars from all around the world.
yes, yes. And I spoke with several, and I don't think, a lot of people don't know that the Templars are made up of both male and female. They're men and women Templars. And this has been the case all the way back to the 1100s and 11th century, actually, which I found very interesting. But there was a convent in Italy that was all female Templar warriors. They were there was I think her name was Teresa. She was the commander of that particular convent, and she trained these Templar women. And apparently, they were all over Europe. It wasn't just men. This was male and female, and most people didn't know. They don't know about that. So I found it really interesting that when I went to Tomar for this, I didn't even know that this was happening. I had been invited for the procession, but I had no idea. So I arrived the day that they were signing this document in Almaral, Portugal.
Wow.
I happened to arrive that day. Yeah, it was pretty powerful. And so the following day, they did the procession, to commemorate this signing of this was like a contract that has to unite them all. And so I interviewed men and women as I was coming down from the castle, from the Convent del Cristo. There, you come down, you come to the convent, the church for Saint John in the plaza in Tomar, and then you come down into Santa Maria do Olival, which is the convent that's dedicated to Mary Magdalene. And one of the pictures I sent you was the statue dedicated to Mary Magdalene, which is in the church. And within her hands is a key. Yeah, it's very important. They're said to have been, the Templars are said to have been the protectors of the bloodline of Mary and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I was told while I was in Tomar was that it was a possibility that that I may have been a descendant. That may have been why I have all these. It's genetically in my DNA that I have all these spiritual experiences that draw me to the Templars, because I literally feel like I've been drawn to them. I mean, I literally feel everywhere I go. I Every country I go to, it doesn't seem to matter. I'm in Scotland, when I go to France, when I go Portugal, Italy, Spain, it doesn't seem to matter. Somehow or another, the Templars find me. So anyway, so it was really interesting to be there for this procession, and it was an emotional experience for me because I felt a great deal of hope for the future of our world, because if they truly are behind a movement to bring about a sovereign world of equality, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's huge, and I'm in support of that.
Did you
Definitely.
join? Did you yourself join a modern Templar organization?
Yes, I am. I joined. I became a Templar. I think it's been about almost a year ago now.
Which organization is that?
It's a Templar organization here in the United States, and it's affiliated with the one in Portugal. So they're all affiliated.
Mm-hmm.
They're all connected. I mean, some of them have different ideas or whatever, but they're all affiliated and all connected. We're all learning the same things.
Mm-hmm. So once you started researching this cave in Brazil and talking to the local people and Brazilian experts on history, I believe you took that research back to Portugal, and I know you spoke to Freddy Silva and some Portuguese Templars. What did they have to say about your discovery? Were they
Well, they were
able
really
to
surprised.
validate it or add anything to it?
Yeah, I interviewed the director of the Convent de Cristo, Rui Ferreira, and I also interviewed João, João Fiandiero. In fact, I interviewed João first in 2018 at the convent of Santa Maria do Olival, and he was shocked. He was shocked at first that first that the cave was there, second that he was a cross expert on top of everything for the Templars. He is a Templar himself, and the look on his face, of course, is in the video. It's in the documentary. He was pretty shocked that he's like, wow. He said, this is definitely affiliated with the Templars. And we talked off, after the interview. And he was really excited about this discovery. The Templars in general right now are very excited about this discovery. There's a lot of controversy back and forth about the dates of possible arrival of the Templars in Brazil. I personally think, and I'm committed to believing that it was early 1300s, sometime between maybe even earlier than 1307. I think the Templars saw the writing on the wall. I think they saw what was coming. Things like this don't just happen overnight, and I think that they sensed it was happening, and they had the fleet, they had the only ships, they were they were the shipbuilders. The Portuguese were the boat builders for all of Europe at this time. They certainly had the money, and they most definitely had the inspiration to leave. And if they had created Portugal. I mean, Portugal was a Templar nation. Freddie Silver is very correct on that. We agreed completely on that. Um, and they wanted to recreate this. They wanted a sovereign nation. And so they went looking. I think that's when they went into La Rochelle, eventually into Scotland. And the Sinclairs went into North America, and from Portugal, I think that's when they went into Brazil. And I think they did it with the blessing of King Dinis. Now, the director at Rui Vieira, at the Convent de Cristo, when we talked, he indicated that it was very possible that King Dinis would have sent the Templars and would have been with his blessing off to Brazil for a portion of the gold, more than likely.
Mm-hmm.
And I happen to agree. I think that would have been, right at that time. Uh, Gold was very valuable for the kings, and they needed it to fund everything. I mean, they needed it for their wars. They needed it for everything. So I think if the Templars had come across a cache of gold, and these gold mines, there's one I found is pretty deep. So if they got gold, if they took all the gold out of there, that was it was probably millions of dollars worth of gold in today's world, just in one cave.
As I watched the documentary and saw that vein of quartz crystals, that was my first idea that they must have known that quartz is often found with gold or next to gold. And then they went
Mhm.
prospecting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the whole area is strewn with quartz. Right? It's just the whole area. You've got your iron oxide soil, which is very commonly found. Gold is commonly found in that type of soil. I mean, I live up here in the gold country in Northern California, and that's what we have here. We have that red iron oxide soil with a lot of quartz crystal everywhere up here. And this is where gold was discovered in California, a tremendous amount of it. So it's the same type of soil, the same type of quartz veining, all of that in this area, just outside of Valparaiso, where the cave is. And so they're not, they're intelligent men after all. I mean, they were running the banking system and everything else in Europe. I mean, they were really pretty much running Europe before their downfall.
They also financed the building of Gothic cathedrals. And I read in a book by Louis Charpentier.
Mhm.
It's an older book about the cathedral in Chartres. And he theorized that
Yeah,
Templars were able to fund the building of these Gothic cathedrals with gold that they brought either from Central America or somewhere else. He thought that they went to the Gulf of Mexico to look for gold, but it's possible that they got it from Brazil. Why not?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, judging from what they had to have gotten out of just this one cave, I mean, we're talking millions and millions of dollars worth of gold that they extracted. And if there are three other caves, and I would suspect they're probably similar, I mean, I'm dying to get up there. I can barely stand it. This COVID really knocked me back as far as, I'm a boots on the ground researcher. I like to get out there and just, get out there and do it myself. Um, I like to read. Of course, I have, I have a PhD, so obviously I read too. I do a lot of research, but I really like the exploration part. I really like to get out there and just see it and explore it examine the evidence, interview people in the area. I like to do that myself. So I've had an interview scheduled with the Kalunga people and the Amazonian tribes that come into Alto Paraíso for over a year scheduled. So I am just champing at the bit to get back into Brazil and interview these Amazonian tribe, which I've already actually interacted with. I was there in 2018. Yeah, I think it was 2018. I interacted with them, but at the time I didn't know that they were the ones that led the Templars from the coast into Alto Paraíso. I found
Oh,
that out.
more
Yeah.
goosebumps. Okay, okay. I want to know more about that.
So, so they, somebody asked me, and I said, I don't know, but I'm going to find out how they got there. And so this was mentioned to me when I was in Tomar, Portugal, that one of the researchers in Portugal had mentioned to him, to the director of the convent, he mentioned that he had found some evidence that Amazonian tribal natives had taken the Templars from the coast, from their ships, through paths through the Amazon jungle into different areas in Brazil. And so of course, I had to find out about this. And so I asked some of the locals. The next thing I know, I'm getting invited for interviews. And so now I've got these interviews set up when I get back there, and I'm dying to find out what they have to show me, to tell me. I think that I'm going to get some pretty good information from these interviews. We'll see what happens, but yeah, and I also have discovered that in North America this was the same thing. The Mimak tribe also assisted the Templars in traveling through North America. So apparently this was consistent. I believe that Native American and indigenous cultures, they recognize you by your energy.
Mm, right.
They resonate with your energy or they don't. And I think that this is why the Templars were not hurt or murdered, or, they were assisted. And not just in North America, but also in South America. I think this was the case. I think they formed, because what I was told in Alto Paraíso by the locals is that the Templars actually intermingled with the tribal people, and that's how they colonized the area. They married into these tribes and they remained in the area, which would make sense to me. So why would they do that?
Well,
Well, I started.
I think that after 1307, they maybe would no longer feel the need to remain monks. And
Exactly.
if you are going to set up your own nation or your own country, you have to populate it. So it doesn't make sense to just have one generation of Templars move there and then die and then it's over, right? So you have to have families, you have to have descendants, and you pass your knowledge and secrets and teachings to your descendants. Whenever people move to another country, it's not necessarily for themselves, but for the benefit of their children. They want the next generation to have a better life or a chance at a better future. That's what I did. I'm an immigrant. I left my homeland because I fell in love with a foreigner and I followed him around the world. And I thought, I'm doing this not necessarily for myself, but for our children.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think this is exactly what they did. I suspect that even the guide that took me down to the cave may even have been a Templar descendant himself. I met a mason who had built a castle in Alto Paraíso. It's a castle. It looks so out of place. It's just hysterical to see it. Anyway, I'm of course drawn to it. My girlfriend and I was like, whoa, that's a castle. So we pulled in, right? And it's not only a castle, but it's designed to be a replica and a smaller version of Camelot.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So, of course, I want to meet the owner. I want to find out who built this place and why did they build it, and right near my cave. It's like 3 miles from the entrance of the road that goes down to the cave. And here's this castle. And not only castle, but Camelot, right? So I meet the owner, the man who had it built, Joao Ramos, and he tells me he's very excited about my discovery. I told him about the cave, and turns out he's a descendant, Templar descendant. He's also a Mason, and so he gives me carte blanche and tells me that if there's anything that he can do for me, he gives me this beautiful gem and tells me, Madame, this is your destiny. You need to share this with the world. This is your destiny. And I mean, he's just really um, adamant about this. And I was very touched. I actually, almost started crying. It was like, wow, because I felt the same thing. I felt that this is just, the whole journey has not been accidental. The whole journey has just continually from France all the way forward to the discovery of the cave. And before, well, actually, right after I was in Dome, France, we were led to Marseille. And my husband and I arrived in Marseille, and there was a cathedral there. Someone had told me that the Templars had been in that area and that they were protecting the bloodline of Mary, and that there were some churches in Marseille that were dedicated to Mary Magdalene. So I was drawn and I wanted to go see them. So we decide which of the cathedrals we're going to walk into, and we go to open the door, and this nun comes out and greets me, and she takes one look at me, and she hugs me, and she starts saying, Madame, Madame, I have been waiting for you since college. I learned English in college so I could speak with you when you come. And she's in her 60s. So this had to have been 20, 35 years before this that she studied English, waiting for me to come. I didn't know who she was, but she knew who I was. And she said, I want you to come into my office and I have a map for you. And I want you to promise me that you will go to Saint Bon. And so I said, of course, madame, I will go. Well, we go up into St. Maximus, where they have the relics, the bones, supposedly, of Mary Magdalene. And they do a procession every year in her honor. And they take her bones out, and including her skull, through the town, and they do this whole ceremony and festival. Well, we go into St. Maximus, and then the map shows us how to get to St. Baume, and we couldn't find it. So we went down to the coast of France. We were expected down there. We had some friends, and it was 4th of July was coming up, and we had some friends that we were meeting down there. So we went down there, and I wake up in the middle of the night, and I have this dream, this vision about this it was like a little hut on top of a mountain. And so I sketched it in my sketchbook, and I woke up my husband in the morning and I said, look, we have to go back and find St. Baume. We have to go back. I promised the nun, and we have to go back. So he didn't want to go that way. He wanted to go through up a different way into Spain. Anyway, so he says, okay, let's do it. And so we drove back, and we drove right to it this time. Now, I think that there is divine timing. Is certain things have to happen at specific times. So anyway, I think that's what was involved. And so this time we drive right to it. We find a convent to sleep. We get a room for the night in the convent. They take us all through the convent. They tell us how, the descendants of Mary Magdalene had married into the royal family in France, and that all the kings, every single one of the kings, just after their inauguration and marriage, they came and did a pilgrimage to St. Baume to be blessed by Mary Magdalene for fertility, so that they would have heirs and descendants. So they're showing me all these things, these relics and things that all these kings had left them as gifts. So following morning, we start hiking up the mountain to go into this grotto where Mary Magdalene had lived for From what I heard while I was there, anytime between 13 and 17 years, we don't know, in intercessory prayer, after her children had been raised, she went up there and that's where she died. Anyway, so we're walking up the hill, we're hiking up this mountain, and I felt like I was in an altered dimension. I felt like I was in two dimensions at the same time. I had butterflies landing on me and birds coming like they were talking to me. And there was this little bug that was on the ground that looked like it was suffering. And I reached down and picked it up and it laid it back down and it just skittered away. And I just felt like I was just in this bubble. It was just bizarre. Anyway, we get up to the top, and there's this grotto. It had been taken over by the Catholic Church. They had been caring for it and keeping it, keeping it up or whatever. And I go into this space and I feel this push of energy, like I was suffocating almost. And I sat down in one of the pews and I immediately went into meditation and intercessory prayer. And the next thing I know, I'm seeing all these dark entities, like swirling, smoky faces, leaving this space and going up through out the top of the grotto. So after that happened, then I feel this peace and this light comes in, and I'm still in intercessory prayer and meditation. I'm still very much focused on what I'm doing. And this light comes in, and these angelic sort of very, very filmy figures just come in and fill this space. And it's just light and beautiful. And my husband said I had this big smile on my face. Well, during that time, a procession had come in of a bishop and 4 priests to conduct the Eucharist for some local or tourists. I don't know who was involved. And so I get tapped on the arm and I open my eyes and I see this priest and he's beaming. He's just got this big smile. And I'm thinking, he knows what's going on here. Well, anyway, the person that tapped me hands me this little grape juice thing. And so we drink that, my husband and I both. And I had been baptized Christian, so I participated. So anyway, the priest invites us up to take the cracker and finish the process and finish the ceremony. And so I take this cracker and I'm walking up, and the bishop takes the cracker out of my mouth and starts swearing at me in French.
Why? Why would he
Yeah,
do that? So rude.
I said it. So what comes out of my mouth is, please forgive him, Father, for he knows not what he says. And he lost it. He
Uh-oh. You challenge his authority.
So the 4 priests take him by the arm and take him out of the space. They just huddle him off, right? And the people are all just dumbfounded. Everybody leaves. And so it's just me and my husband are left in this space. And I'm just relishing in this. It's beautiful. I mean, it's just this energy is just, I can feel the presence of Mary Magdalene's spirit. I mean, I could just feel the energy in this place. And I can just feel her peace there and her love, and I'm just feeling this wonderful feeling. So about 15 minutes later, we're just enjoying the space, and in comes this priest that had initially smiled at me. And he says, I am so sorry. I apologize to you, madame. I'm so sorry. We don't know what happened with him. We don't know. I am so sorry, but we thank you for what you have done.
Oh, okay. You reminded him.
I didn't have to say a word. He just said, we thank you for what you have done. You can stay as long as you like. Enjoy, enjoy this space. So we're just relishing in it. I got some water from out of this little, I don't know what it really was. It's probably her drinking source, at the time. But anyway, so I take a little bit of that just as a memento, and I just feel like whatever I was supposed to do was done. Whatever the nun wanted me to do was done. So I think what had happened when I look back on the situation is we must have made some sort of an agreement lifetimes ago. It's the only thing I can think of. Many lifetimes ago that we were going to do this. And I know that I had been a Cathar at one of my past lives. And so I suspect that it may have had something to do with that, but I don't know for sure. I really don't know. But anyway, it was done. It happened. And like I said, that was in the same trip when I was in the, when I went to the Dungeon and Dome. That was the same trip that this happened, that this took place. And I think that all of these experiences have prepared me for what I'm doing now, because I was an art professor. I mean, that's what my background was. I had I had a master's at the time. I had a master's degree in fine art, and in fact, I had just finished my PhD in metaphysics, metaphysical sciences, and but I really had no intention of giving up the college. The position I had. I loved teaching. I really loved it. I loved what I did. Yeah, I taught sculpture, anatomy. I taught, and we talked about these things in my classes. I did lectures about this stuff. I did lectures about, all of my metaphysical discoveries. And, I talked to the students about all this stuff. The nature of matter, I talked about quantum physics, everything that I was studying, I was also sharing with my students. So I really loved what I did. I really enjoyed it. So there really wasn't much that was going to pull me away from that. I couldn't imagine anything that would have changed me from doing that. Lo and behold, when I come back from discovering the cave in Brazil in 2015, my house burns down 9 days later.
Oh.
My entire house burned to the ground. My studio, all my artwork, everything, all my curriculum.
Uh,
I've 30 years,
well,
all
that,
burned.
that's a huge loss.
Well,
And
it
it's
was,
also like the end of a chapter. That's how it
yes.
feels to me.
It was a transfiguration, because not only did it wipe away the past and catapult me into something else, I didn't know at the time what it was going to be, but not only did it catapult me into something else, but it also transformed everything that we had owned, had basically been liquidated. And there was a utilities company that was involved in the fire, and so we recouped much of our losses. About a quarter of what our wealth had been worth was given to us. I mean, it gave me the means to be able to travel. It gave me some time. I didn't have to go back to the college right after the transplant. I had some time to think about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And having found this cave, it just kept gnawing at me and gnawing at me. I was like, okay, I've got to bring this to the world. I really have a responsibility to bring this to the world. So that's what happened. It's like I felt like the universe was nudging me the whole time, that everything has ever happened has been moving me forward through my destiny to share this, the truths of our ancient history with the world. So that's what I'm doing now. I actually just finished writing my book. I'm now into the editing process, and that should be coming out here hopefully in the next couple of months.
I can't wait to read it. It seems to me that in the last few years, it's women who are spearheading this um, discovery movement, or movement that involves discovering traces of Templars on different continents in different countries. And it's women who believe that Templars had it in them to go to North America or South America. And we're also the ones who are open to the idea that Templars mingled with local population and started families.
Well, feminine femininity in itself, I mean, the whole fertility, women held that power, fertility, that was really honored before the medieval times. I mean, we went through this real change in paradigm and thinking and everything during the medieval time. I mean, it was happening. It was already happening with the Judaism and Islam. I mean, they were much more patriarchal than the previous spiritual belief systems and of the indigenous cultures. Most of them were balanced. I mean, everywhere in the world that I go, I find a male temple and a female temple complementing it. Even Machu Picchu, many people don't know, but Machu Picchu has its feminine complement Choquequirao, which is not far from Cusco, that you can go into as well. Many people don't know this. Well, so here we come up into the Middle Ages, and this is the crux of it. I mean, we've got Constantine coming in 300, what was it, 65 AD, and he's going to take and get rid of everything that honors the feminine. Not only that, he wants to make Mary Magdalene a prostitute. And, let's move forward with the canonized my version of Christianity. And that is what we are going to cram down everybody's throats from now on. And he was pretty successful at that. Moving up into the 12th century, we have the Inquisition, and they're burning millions of women at this stake. They are going to annihilate the feminine power, and that's what they set out to do. And there are thousands, millions of women today that have, I think, reborn, that were Cathars, and they were women from these times. They had these past life traumatic experiences. In fact, when I was in Alto Paraíso, the first day back in 2015, I went up with some friends that I happened to meet in the middle of the street from England, this one gal. Next thing I know, I'm in a 1965 Volkswagen bus with symbols and these young kids, and we're heading up, to this mountaintop area. Well, we had to change cars after, because the bus wasn't going to make it. So we had to move into a different car. Anyway, next thing I know, I'm sitting next to one of the two town shamans and we're heading up to this community, I guess you could call it, collective of people who'd come together from all over the world, Alto Paraíso, right? And they had taken these 5,000 hectares of land and transformed it into what I thought, what felt to me like a Neo Lemuria. I mean, literally like a new Lemuria. It was beautiful. These places are beautiful, and they're all over in Brazil. These people come from Europe and Canada and Japan, and you name it. They come in and they create these plots of land that are sustainable. They're solar. They're just beautiful, and they've got waterfalls and they're just gorgeous. Anyway, so I end up here, and I'm just having this great time. It's fabulous. I'm thinking I want to move here, right? Well, that wasn't in the cards. A few days later, I found out I met the second town shaman by accident again in front of the health food store. But anyway, so I'm up there, and I realized that I have no cell phone service. I can't get a hold of Adele, my roommate, and the gal I was traveling with. And so I better get back down into Alto Paraíso. So I started asking people for rides. And next thing I know, I'm with this woman. And what does she do? She's the wife of the town shaman, and she helps women deal with the trauma from Cathar lives.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Right?
well, you are in good company, because you said that you believe that in a past life you were a Cathar. So presumably you carry very old trauma in you. Did she help you?
Yes, yeah, she did. And we talked at great length, and we realized that we had probably been really good friends or sisters or something in one of those lifetimes, in that lifetime. Anyway, I did some clearing, she did some clearing work with me, and she invited me actually to come. She was in the Netherlands, I think, somewhere. She also went back and forth to Europe, and she did these workshops for these women all over the world that she did them for. But anyway, so this was, I think, in my energy field, and I was drawn to this woman, and here we are together. So 2 days later, after I'd found the cave initially, I'm coming out of the health food store again. This health food store seemed to be one of those places, and this guy taps me on the shoulder again, and he says, "Can you, sit down?" He's broken Portuguese. "Can you sit down? Sit down." And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" I mean, why not, right, at this point? And so I sit down. He draws me a map, And he tells me to go to these 3 waterfalls, sacred ancient waterfall sites, and perform the ceremony that I'm directed to perform when I get there. So I did that. I went to all 3 places. I performed the ceremonies. And when I came back down the mountain and talked to him about the ceremonies, and I said, you know, I thought initially that I was supposed to bring my family here and move here and participate in one of these communities up here. And he says, no. He says, you're supposed to take that energy back to the U.S. Yeah. So I've known for many years that, you know, that I am a carrier and a conduit for energy, for particular energy. I also have, having lived numerous lifetimes in Egypt, and as a priestess, I know that this is something that we did. So I have memories, really clear memories of it. So I'm not surprised anymore at this. I've helped people cross over. I've been they're at the deathbed of numerous people and helped them cross over. I've helped people that cross over that have already been dead at different sites and things. So this is something that I'm real familiar with now. It's not shocking to me anymore. It really intensified after 1990 when I had that near-death experience. It really started intensifying, but it's no longer foreign to me.